الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I welcome you to another episode of our series, Safara Al Keram, where we strive to be in the company of the blessed and holy angels by perfecting our recitation of the Quran. The recitation of the Quran is one of the primary ways to increase our own iman. As one beautiful parable tells us, the heart is afflicted with rust, and one of the ways to remove this rust is by reciting the Quran. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the believers as those who recite the Quran. He mentions the characteristics of the believers, and he starts off this description by saying, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. Those who recite the book of Allah, and they pray, and they fast, and they do good deeds, they are the ones, يَرْجُونَ تِجَارَةً لَن تَبُورَ. They are going to have a very beautiful, a very beneficial, a very lucrative transaction, meaning that they will gain Jannah. So to recite and to memorize the Quran is an integral part of our iman. As the famous companion Ibn Mas'ud said, that he who does not have anything of the Quran in his heart, in his chest, he is like a broken house. He is like a ruined house. Meaning that if you wish to build your house, you want to make a strong house of your heart, recite the Quran and memorize the Quran. If you don't have anything of the Quran, Ibn Mas'ud described you then like a ruined or a house in shambles. And that is why the Quran describes itself as being enclosed in the hearts or in the chests of those who have knowledge. As Allah says, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. The Quran is composed of clear verses, which is encompassed, enclosed in the chests of those who have knowledge. So if you wish to have knowledge, you wish to have iman, you must recite, you must memorize, you must ponder over, and you must implement the Quran. There is no other way besides this. In our previous episode, we were discussing the rules of the mad, or the elongation of the vowels. And today we're going to move on to part 2 of these rules. And we will discuss what happens when a hamza occurs after a mad. Remember, we defined the natural mad to be something in which there is no hamza before or after, and no sukoon before or after. Now we're going to talk about what if there is. A hamza before the mad, we discussed it already. We call that what type of mad? Substitution. Okay. Now we discuss what occurs if a hamza exists after the letter of mad. Now, logically this can occur in one of two ways. The hamza can either be in the same word, or it can be at the beginning of a different word. Which means that the mad occurs at the end of one word, and the hamza occurs in the beginning of the second. So let's take each of these two rulings one by one. If the hamza occurs in the same word as the mad, we call it the connected mad, al-mad al-muttasil. Obviously, why do we call it connected? Because it is connected, because it's in the same word. So common sense, you call it al-mad al-muttasil, the mad which is connected. This mad, you have to lengthen a very long way. So you have 4 or 5. Scholars have given you the choice. You can do it 4 to 4 harakas. What is a haraka once again? It is the time that it takes to open a finger from a closed fist. Okay, so this is 1 haraka, 2 harakas, 3 harakas, 4 harakas. So the scholars say you have a choice of 4 or 5 harakas. Basically make it very long. So you must make this mad very long. Some examples. طائفة. Notice we have the alif followed by a hamza, okay, in the same word. So then you have to make it long. طائفة. You cannot just say طائفة, which is a natural mad, 2 harakas. That would be a mistake. Likewise over here, خطيئة. You have 4 or 5. You have to make it long. سوءة. You have a waw preceded by a dhamma followed by a hamza. You have to make it once again long. As-samaa. Once again you have an alif preceded by a fatha followed by a hamza. Again, it's just simple common sense. You look at the word, you examine what's before and after it, and you apply the rule. It's not that difficult. All it requires is you know the rule. So the rule is what? If the hamza occurs in the same word after the letter of mad, then you have to prolong it to 4 or 5. Likewise, si'at. You have a ya preceded by a kasra followed by a hamza. Once again, you make it long. Likewise, malaika. Okay, again, it's a common mistake. Al-malaika. No, this is a natural mad. You have to prolong it. Al-malaika. You have to make it long. If you don't make it long, then it is a mistake. So if it's the same word, you call it al-mad al-muttasil, or the connected mad. The ruling, you make it long, 4 or 5, meaning you have to make it very long. What's the other situation or scenario? If the hamza occurs at the beginning of a different word. This time, again, it doesn't take too much of knowledge to understand. It's called a separated mad. In contrast to a connected mad, in Arabic we say al-mad al-munfasil. Why is it separated? Because it's in 2 separate words. Again, it's common sense. In this case, we have an option. We have a broader choice. We can lengthen it to 2 or 4 or 5 harakas. It's completely up to us. So you can't go wrong whatever you do, as long as you do a mad. Okay, whatever you do is going to be correct. There's only one point, and that is that, suppose you open up the Quran to recite. The first time you come across a separated mad, you need to make a choice. Do I want to recite al-mad al-munfasil as 2, or as 4, or as 5? Once you've made that choice, then until you finish that recitation, you should be consistent. You should be consistent in your choice. If you've chosen to recite it as 2 harakas, every time you come to a mad al-munfasil, a separated mad, make sure it's 2 harakas. Likewise, if you've chosen to be 4, make it 4, and with 5, make it 5. If you mix and match, it will not be correct tajweed. You should be consistent, but obviously not for the rest of your life, only for that particular recitation. When you sit down, you open the Quran. When you close it, then the next time you come, you can choose another length to do it. Let us look at some examples. Fi anfusikum. Okay, let us now do fi anfusikum as 2 harakas. Amr, why don't you try it as 2 harakas?
في أنفسكم.
Very good. Okay. Why don't you try it as 4 harakas? قُوا أنفسكم.
قُوا أنفسكم.
Very good. And why don't you try it as 5? Or let's do the next example. Try that as 5. Ya ayyuha.
يا أيها.
Okay, very good. See, so we have 2, 4, 5. Everything is allowed. If I wanted to do fi anfusikum as 4, I could also do that. Fi anfusikum. I can do this as 5 as well. Fi anfusikum. So you can do it 2, 4, or 5. But, as I said, you must be consistent, okay? If you're not consistent, this will be a mistake in tajweed. Likewise, inna awhayna. Inna awhayna ilayka. So you have here the option of inna. You have 2, 4, or 5. If I want to do the 2, inna awhayna, move on. You don't have to make it long. So it's up to you how you want to do it, 2, 4, or 5. Therefore, this is the rule when the hamza occurs after the mad. Very simple. If the hamza occurs in the same word, it is called the connected mad. Al-mad al-muttasil. And in this case, you must make it long. 4 or 5, but long. You have no option of making it short. If it occurs in a different word, then you have the option. If you want, you can make it 2. If you want, you can make it 4. And if you want, you can make it 5. But you must be consistent in what you are reciting. If you recite the first time as 2, it must be continually 2, and so on and so forth. Let us now recite Surah Al-Tariq together. And let us try to make different choices of the mad. Surah Al-Tariq is the 86th surah in the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
والسماء والطارق.
والسماء والطارق.
Okay, what type of mad is in the sama?
It's
a connected mad. So you must make it long. If I were to say, وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ, that's a mistake, not allowed. I have made a mistake in tajweed. It must be long. How about in al-tariq? What type of mad is there? Natural mad. Okay. Let us now move on. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقُ
وما أدراك ما الطارق.
Okay, here we have وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ. What type of mad is this?
Separated.
It's separated mad. Now, how did I recite it?
4.
With 4 or 5. I recited it long, okay?
Yeah.
Let us now recite it as 2 because we're allowed the choice. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقُ
وما أدراك ما الطارق.
So this is the 2. We did it. Both is allowed. Okay, we can have it 2, 4, or 5. Let us now go 5. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقُ
وما أدراك ما الطارق.
So we went out all the way. We maxed out to 5. Now, once again, for those of you who are not familiar with the harakas and how to do them, as I said, you have 2 ways. Firstly, in the beginning, when you're alone, you can actually physically open your hands and try to calculate how long the harakas are. Secondly, and this is the better way, go to the mashayikh, go to the qurra, go to the huffaz and recite to them, and also listen to their recitation. And listen to cassettes as well. When you listen to cassettes, you'll get a much better idea of how to judge how long a particular haraka is. Let's move on. النجم الثاقب
النجم الثاقب
إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ
إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ.
Okay, let's rewind some rulings of tajweed that we learned earlier. النجم, what do we do on the jim there? قلقلة, because it's a silent jim and it's the lowest type. إن كل إخفاء, noon sakin followed by kaf. نفس لما, what do we do? إدغام without غنة, because there's tanween followed by alam. لما غنة, why? Mim mushaddad. We said anytime there's a mim mushaddad in the Quran, there will be a غنة. عليها حافظ. Another common mistake is that the alif is made deep. So many people might say حافظ. This is a mistake. The alif has to be light. حافظ, because there's a light letter before it. فلينظر. What do we do there? إخفاء. Okay. فلينظر الإنسان. Another إخفاء. And then مما. This is actually an idgham. This is an idgham because أصله is min ma. Right? أصله, the original is min and then followed by ma. So فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق.
فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق.
خلق من ماء دافق.
خلق من ماء دافق.
The ma'in, we have no choice. We have to make it long. Okay? يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب.
يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب.
إنه على رجعه لقادر.
إنه على رجعه لقادر.
Okay, the ra and the qadir. What type of ra is that? Light, because it is silent and before it is a kasra. Okay? With this we come to the conclusion of today's episode. We'll continue discussing the types of mudud in the next episode. Recite the Quran properly and try to be in the company of the holy angels, inshallah. Until then, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.